A landlord's Section 8 tenant faces eviction because she couldn't pay the $18 a month that was her portion of the rent. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. All right, so I've got an interesting article for you today, and it has to do with Section 8 tenants, okay? And it's an opinion piece. It's coming out of the Cleveland, Ohio area, and it was really an interesting story. When I read it, I was like, my goodness, this is the prime example of why people don't want to deal with Section 8. This is ridiculous, okay? So you have a landlord with the Section 8 tenant, okay? And the tenant, the only part of the rent that they have to pay is $18 a month, and they just could not do it, okay? They just could not pay that $18 a month. And it got to the point where with late fees and penalties, they ended up owing the landlord $800. So the landlord is filing an eviction against this person. And the only question I have is, what kind of dire situation are you in where you can't come up with $18 a month to pay your landlord? Okay? I don't know anybody in a situation that dire. I really don't. Most people could borrow that much from people or just get it gifted to them. They could go out and beg for a day and come up with $18. So what this really comes down to, it isn't that the person didn't have $18. It's that their priorities are wrong. Their priorities are completely wrong. In fact, my personal belief is that because she was receiving Section 8 and the Section 8 was paying the grand majority of the rent, then she felt that it wasn't even necessary that she pay anything. She's like, hey, the landlord's not going to kick me out over this little tiny sum of money, okay? And she felt entitled, and that's what my personal opinion is. And before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below, and let me know what you think. Why do you believe that a tenant who only had to pay $18 a month didn't pay, okay? Now, I know if the portion of her rent was that low, she probably has an extremely low income. But here's the question once again, right? Like, can you look anywhere else in her life and see spending that was wrong? And it's going to be pretty hard to not see it, okay? If you see her eating out even once, that would cover the rent probably. I mean, fast food isn't cheap right now. And, like I said, she doesn't see it as being important because basically the government is giving her this for free. So she basically doesn't care. That's what my personal opinion is. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Let's get into the article. This article is coming from Cleveland.com, and it says, landlords aren't running charities and they shouldn't have to. Justice B. Hill. Let's get into it. I side with tenants under most circumstances. Let's keep it real. A metropolis like Cleveland has an army of slumlords who will squeeze as many pennies out of a property as they can without putting dollars back into it. And I want to stop right there because this is typical answer from these tenant rights people. They're like, oh, there's an army of slumlords out here. No, you got a couple of bad actors who, they get the attention, and then you have a ton, and I'm talking about a ton, 99% of landlords who are doing everything right. They're repairing their properties, they're keeping them well maintained, they're treating their tenants with respect, and their rents are reasonable. Market rate is reasonable, okay? But we get lumped in with a bunch of these morons who aren't doing things right. And that's what I hate. I've always hated that, okay? So if people are doing things right, 99% of the time, well, people, they only see the negative. They only see that one negative article, and then they make the stupid assumption that all landlords are acting that way. It's just not true. It's bad for business. I know it's bad for business. And simply put, it's not true, okay? So let me continue. I had to cut in on that after that first paragraph because that part annoyed the hell out of me. In old homes like those on the east side, properties need upkeep and repairs, which will cost landlords a lot of money. As much as they might want to pass on these costs to a tenant, they can't always do it. So landlords have to hope their tenant understands. The two sides have a relationship, a simple relationship. A tenant gets a clean, cozy place to live. A landlord gets money each month. The relationship falls apart when one side doesn't keep up its end. That's what I've learned from listening to a friend who owns a handful of rental properties in the city and near ring suburbs. He's got a crew of workers who he relies on to keep his properties in good repair. Yet even that's not enough for some tenants who can't seem to fit rents into their budget. Aside from perhaps food, I can think of nothing more important to a family's well-being than a secure place to stay. And I agree, okay? So if the rent and a secure place to stay is the most important thing, why do people prioritize other things instead? They say, hey, I am going to, cigarettes, alcohol, gambling before they pay their rent. I'm not saying that was the case in this story, right? But I've seen many cases just like that where you have people and they'll make their car payment before their rent payment because and I can understand the logic behind it. But at the same time, I'm like, hey, I would rather be without a car than without a house. Okay. Now, not having a car could lead you to not having a house, but that's another story, right? The most immediate worst impact would be to lose your housing, especially when you have kids. Okay. So in my opinion, when I pay my bills, I always pay my mortgage payment first. Very first thing. Everything else can wait. Okay. That's the way I pay my bills, even as a person who isn't super low income. Okay. But a lot of tenants, they don't have the same sort of, I would say, financial education that I have. So they do things in the wrong manner and then they end up facing eviction because of it. And I wish that there were people out there to teach them these sort of things. And, I do the best I can with my tenants, but my tenants are pretty good as well. So I don't get a lot of these problems. Still, rents baffle some people. My friend told me he started an eviction process on a tenant who, because she qualified for housing aid under Section 8, paid him $18 monthly for her share. Uncle Sam picked up the rest. During the 2+ years she stayed in his property, she'd pay 1 month, miss 1 month, and then play catch up. She did catch up, but then she fell into arrears afresh. With late fees attached, she owed my friend $800, which he realized he'd never get. Instead of the money, he wanted his rental back, which is why he went to court looking to evict her. And see, that's kind of the problem when you're dealing with this sort of stuff, okay? $800, you're not trying to be a mean person. You're not trying to be a mean person, but you see the writing on the wall. You're like, okay, you're never going to pay me on time. You're never going to, this is just going to be a continual process. Maybe you'll get caught up. Maybe you'll get some sort of assistance to give me the money that I am owed, okay? But this is going to be a continual problem. So what do you do, okay? Do you continue to take the Section 8 payment and just write off that $18? I know some people would do that, depending on how much Section 8 is being paid to them. But in my opinion, this is the sort of thing that will drive landlords, out of the business or drive them away from dealing with Section 8 tenants. They'll say, hey, it's just not worth it. This is the way the Section 8 tenant treats me, even though, they act lazy. They act as though they don't care about what I'm trying to do. They don't care about me maintaining the property. They don't care about anything except for themselves. They're selfish. Okay, that's the way some of them act. I'm not saying that's all Section 8 tenants, but those bad apples drive a lot of landlords out of wanting to deal with Section 8 tenants. And that makes it more difficult for those good tenants, those good Section 8 tenants, to find housing. So yeah, the problems with the program go beyond just the issues I have with bureaucracy. A lot of the tenants that you're dealing with are not top tier tenants and will act in just the way that this lady is acting, okay? Nobody can call an eviction Call eviction a pleasant process. To see a person's belongings on the lawn is enough to make you weep. You wonder what happened in this person's life to make eviction a landlord's last option. My friend hesitates to use eviction and his tenant didn't want him to. Eviction for someone on Section 8 is devastating to their lives. They could lose the privilege of being in the federal program, a safety net for the truly needy. But my friend doesn't run a charity. he's got a rental business which he hopes to pass to his 11-year-old son and 16-year-old daughter. His tenant couldn't know this. What she did know is she didn't want to move, and she absolutely didn't want an eviction. She asked her minister to intercede, and he did. So, sounds like she went begging to her church, and her church ended up paying the money that she owed. Okay? And yes, an eviction can cost a Section 8 person their voucher. So there are consequences to it. But that would be even more of a, that would lead me more to the question of why aren't you paying this $18? $18. That's it. $18 a month is what this lady had to pay, and got to the point where she owed $800. Like I said, there's a lot of reasons landlords don't want to deal with this sort of tenant. This is a shiny example of that right there. And I'm just curious, what would you do? Okay, what would you just take the loss? $18 isn't a lot to lose on the rent if the Section 8 voucher is covering a grand majority of it, right? If you take the loss, though, you could be just basically stuck with this tenant. I don't like the idea of doing that. I feel like actions should have consequences. And this tenant who's getting this free ride from the government should have to contribute something. They shouldn't get a completely free rent. That's my opinion, but what do you think? Okay, put a comment in the comment section down below.